Learn from my mistake. Are you tired of hearing the same old advice when it comes to real estate? Do you want to learn from the biggest and baddest mistakes in the industry? Then welcome to Learn from My Mistake, the podcast that brings you real estate professionals from all over, sharing the biggest blunders and how to avoid them. I'm one of your hosts, Jake Remillard, and I'm joined by my partner, Mary Verratti. We're here to give you the inside scoop on what not to do in the real estate game. From brokers to investors, we've got it all. We're not just here to tell you about our guest failures, though. We're here to help you learn from them so you can make the right moves when it counts. So buckle up and get ready to hear some juicy stories and expert advice you won't find anywhere else. This is Learn from My Mistake. New episodes drop every week. Don't miss out. Learn from my Hey, what's going on?
Hi. How's it going, Jake? It's been a while.
It has been. It's been. We had a little inconsistency, but we're back. We're back in action.
I know. So, Mary Verratti here, of course, with my partner, Jake Remillard, with some crying kids in the background, as usual.
Oh.
And today we're joined by our guest, Mary Verratti. And Mary, we're so excited to have you with us. I love you. I feel like the first time we met, I was like, you're like my long lost sister, and we're going to be BFFs, even if we live on opposite sides of the country.
I was going to say, though, although I know when you and Jake met, you jumped on a chair and pointed at him, I felt like our connection was similar. We were just in a smaller room and you didn't have to jump on a chair.
Were you also terrified, scared for your life? You saw that wild look in her eye?
Right. But what's funny is I saw it and I was like, that's my look. Like, I feel like I'm looking at myself.
Yeah, I feel like Mary and I are very similar in certain things. So Jake might be the quiet one on the podcast today.
100%.
Not because I'm muted either.
No. So Mary, tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you got started in real estate investing.
Yeah. So Mary Verratti, I'm from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I spent probably about 15 to 20 years in different retail store management type environments, and then spent the last 7 or 8 years working for Amazon, always in operational HR, people-focused roles, leadership roles, strategic leadership, that kind of stuff. And as much as I love doing those kinds of things, I think I just always had like this inkling of what's next, and do I want to, work for a corporation till I retired? Do I want to try to do something for myself? And then during COVID, I was with Amazon, so working a ton because it was just madness for like 3 years and still is. And, I was working a lot by myself. I was living in Seattle at the time before I moved back home to Pittsburgh, and, just started thinking about like, what's next? I've got a little bit more free time because I can't go anywhere, right? Everything is shut down.
Yeah.
And I when I moved to start working for them, I rented my house in Pittsburgh, and it had been probably 6 or 7 years at this point. And never thought about making that like a bigger thing in my life, but I was like, oh, well, it makes sense, right? Like I'm owning a property, making an income off of that property. How do I expand this and how do I keep it moving? And I, of course, when you start Googling things and looking at things on your phone, you start to get ads for things. So I started to get ads for a women's network, or women's real estate investors network. And it was their masterclass. It's called REEN. And I think it was like maybe right after Thanksgiving, November 2020. So like the heart of COVID, everything shut down. Like I didn't travel for the holidays, anything like that. So I was just sitting at home and I was like, all right, for $17, let me take this class. And so it was, I think the first week of December, and it was just enlightening and educational. And the part that really like kind of hooked me at the end, like throughout the week, was they were showing us how to actually do it instead of just throwing the information at us. And, you just have to take action, and like, here are the steps, and you're like, you know what you're doing, right? Like we do a lot of these types of skills that are required to be an investor or a wholesaler. Like we do those things on a regular basis. So it's like, how do you just make it work? So ended up doing the masterclass, loved it. stayed in their mentorship. So did a paid mentorship for the next like 14 weeks. And through that process, knew I was moving back to Pittsburgh. So was always sort of just trying to decide like, okay, what can I do now while I'm still in Seattle, but I'm also moving back across the country, right? So I didn't want to get anything started and then walk away from it. So ended up finding my business partner before I even moved home unintentionally. Brigitte David is my current business partner, and we met in the REIN, in the Women's Investors Network, and saw her introduce herself and said, like, hey, like, let's meet when I get back home. I'm moving home. Like, let's meet and hang out, and like, let's see if we can work together, help each other, do whatever. So we met once I moved back, and like immediately started marketing together. And
nice.
Like the rest, yeah, it's truly like the rest is history. We just like, we're like, okay, like we're doing this, like, and we're going to help each other and do it together. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So really just focused on like, say yes to every property, get it under contract, decide what to do with it later. Right. So really focused on, I would say, buy and holds. We turned a couple of those into short-term rentals, like when we started. And then in the last year, we've really needed to narrow our focus, as I'm sure you guys know. Like, you got to have a regular cash flow coming in order to. I love it. That's usually what mine looks like with cats.
Sorry, my cat's coming to say hi right now.
I have 3, so I always have them running around. But yeah, so we needed to narrow our focus because we were just all over the place with just a bunch of rehabs, like, you know, money.
The shiny object syndrome when you first get started, right? It's like, I want to make money doing anything. What deal how can I make money from this?
Right, exactly. Well, and then you end up not making any money, and you're like, how are we going to pay the mortgages this month? So we were like, well, what are we good at? And we're really good at putting processes in place. Brigitte is a fabulous designer and just creates the most amazing spaces. So we were like, let's continue to build out our own short-term rental portfolio, but let's also start doing this for other people. So we started Society G, which is a design, furnishing, and property management company for midterm and short-term rentals. So nice. We are, on location today. Feels cool
okay,
to say
so back up for a minute. Tell me about like when you started. I love that you immediately like found a networking group and joined a mentorship. I mean, I know you said you paid $17 for a masterclass, which is nothing, right? At that point, everything was like online Zoom classes. It was great during COVID. People were like, I'm a life coach and I'll teach you how to be one for $5. Yeah. But tell me a little bit more about that mentorship and what that was like for you, because, a lot of people we've had on here are like, oh yeah, I read Rich Dad Poor Dad and I wanted to figure this out on my own. But you kind of jumped into mentorship early on. Mm-hmm. So what was that like?
Yeah, I honestly don't know if I would be sitting here today if I didn't do it that way. I think part of just my situation at the time was that I was working, 60, 70 plus hours a week, running a team for Amazon, so it was like, I needed structure if I was going to like really learn and build something out. And it was a community too. I think that's big for me. Like being able to, what is it called? Mirroring when you have ADHD. Yeah. Like if you're sitting in a room with somebody, like you're going to actually get shit done. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, it was like just that accountability that was indirect of like, hey, you're getting on these meetings once a week. You are, working through like a list of things to set up your business, to do all these things and, just take the next step to further your career. And then finally it's like you're going and door knocking, or you're going and, talking to potential sellers and trying to get them under contract. So it was, that was probably, I think, what propelled me into like seeing that I could do it.
Yeah. That's awesome. It sounds like they made it like actionable and like take this step by step.
Yeah. Yeah. They do a really nice job, and it's very educational. And there's coaches along the way that are just kind of helping you through each scenario, but there also ended up being a ton more women that were joining. So you also have like that network, right? Of people that are super experienced, people that are brand new. And there was just always always somebody to reach out to if there was like questions or if something came up and you hadn't experienced it before. I think it was like learning that, like, do it as you go. You don't have to be the expert. You can just take that next step and then figure it out as you go, and just really being confident to do that.
So you were talking a little bit about, when you got started and meeting your partner and kind of getting things going, and it happened it sounded like kind of organically, the two of you had like this good energy and everything. And maybe to the listeners, if anybody has not gone through that process, they have not adopted a partner and started a business together, I'm sure there were some downs along with those ups. So what were maybe some of those mistakes that you guys made together while you were, kicking all that marketing off?
Yeah. I think, so with me and Brigitte, I think we are lucky, and by the grace of God, we're put into each other's lives, I think. So we've just always had a very egoless friendship, right? I think that is important. We've kind of gone through and stumbled together as we went. One of the things I did write down for mistakes is we've had two other partners join us for like small ventures that it didn't go so well. And now we know what the reasons are. In hindsight, you always kind of see what those things are. And our biggest mistakes thus far are not aligning our core values with the people's core values that we're working with, right? And I think that has bit us in the ass multiple times and in multiple scenarios. So like with a contractor, with a partner that's going to do a JV with you, we found out the hard way twice. If our core values don't align, it's you kind of feel it coming, but it never ends well. And there's usually some sort of threat of legal, all that kind of stuff. So I think really just having those tough conversations about core values and goals, and getting to know people before you start working with them. And like Brigitte and I did not do that. Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like we throw out the term core values, and like, I know them, right? And Jake and I know them, and we have them as part of our, VTO for our company, for anyone who's read Traction, right? And implemented that. And core values, I feel like it's a term like people throw it around. So just, I guess, explain like what, Jake's got the book. I have the book here too. I mean,
in my
it's within arm's reach. Okay.
Right.
But like, explain, what are your core values now? And maybe how would you, knowing your core values, like how would you have approached those relationships differently?
Yeah. I think the biggest part of Brigitte and I's core values together is how we work with and like manage people in relationships, right? So are we partnering with somebody who sees relationships as the building blocks of future business, right? Like that's so important. And like, you are nothing without the relationships and the people that you spend your time with, right? So that was huge for us. And although we felt like we had those conversations, right? Like now we know how to dig in a little bit deeper and really get that information out of that person. And it may just mean spending more time with them and seeing them handle stressful situations, seeing them handle a tough conversation with a contractor or with, someone else on the team, even just amongst ourselves, right? We those red flags were there, and we didn't lean into them enough. I think core values too. So people and just what those relationships look like. And then being a pillar and doing more in our community is huge for us. And if we have a partner or a vendor that we're working with that isn't aligned with that, then it's not something that, we don't want to waste our time, building something with someone who doesn't share that same value. And I think that kind of goes along with just the giving back side. So how are we bettering our community that we live in, but then also how are we bringing people along with us? So one of the things that we're indirectly like super excited about is that there are a lot of females in real estate in Pittsburgh. Mainly it's the realtor side, right? There are not a lot of female investors doing what we're doing. And that very quickly was noticeable to us because we would go to, just the regular events that we were attending, as networking and talk about what we're doing. And we would just slowly start to have people asking more questions and women coming up to us and more women showing up the next time or the next time. Right. And like, I see that as such an opportunity because like similar to you, Marie, like I have zero problem like having a voice in any room. But I think for a lot of females, that's a concern, right? Or it's an insecurity about, if I say something, am I going to get shut down? I'm surrounded by males. How do I make my point and not get judged? Or there's just so many things that go along with it. So one of the slogans that we sort of adopted is carry as you climb. So being able to build and bring people up, anybody, that needs help or needs guidance or needs some coaching, like how do we make that a part of, where we're going in our business going forward?
I love that. I love that you put a slogan to it to like give it meaning. I think a lot of people get stuck on having to have a core value and just associating with the word, but really, putting a phrase in there and giving it that meaning, it's a lot more powerful. And I just wanted to say I really like that one. Carry as you climb.
Yeah, I feel like I saw it on a t-shirt. So of course I bought the t-shirt. But I'm not sure where it actually came from. But I feel like it's just like I almost feel like it's an obligation, that being put in this situation myself, like there's a reason, and because I'm comfortable, I'm comfortable in male dominated environments, always have been. So how do I make room and, give voices to people that don't feel comfortable?
Yeah, that's really good. I love that. Carry as you climb. That's a really good one. Jake and I were at an event. We have a group called Investor Harvest. It's a membership event. And we were actually getting people to start using traction and go through and develop some core values and things like this. And it was amazing because I think sometimes you get into these rooms and of course, everyone's like, oh yes, my core value is integrity. Right. And you're like, okay, but great. What does that mean to you? Right.
Yeah.
And like something like that, carry as you climb, that gives so much more meaning to a core value than just the word, like Jake said. And then I also gave them the example. I said, listen, guys, you're taking you can't just be listening to everyone else's in here and take them that they have no meaning to you. Because at the end of the day, I'm like, we've all seen Wolf of Wall Street, right? Like that company was not integrity. Like that was not a core value, right?
Yeah.
So like be conscious of like there are different companies and different people, and even for us, right? Like we're hiring an acquisitions person right now, and like people in acquisitions, this sales mentality, you think of like a Wolf of Wall Street type person, but you know what? That's not going to fit in our company core values. So now we have to really like balance, how do we find the right person that can do that job with the level of integrity that we want, but also like be a killer salesman. You know what I mean?
Yep. I think it's important to, at least what we're noticing too, is that like you have to be willing and ready to update your core values and change them. Because like, I don't know if I could have said like, those were our core values a year ago. You know what I mean? Because it's like, you kind of have to see like how, what are we going to stand for? That's kind of what I look at is like, what do we stand for as a business, as an individual person? And then how do we combine that together? I think it's the way that you live your life. A lot of like true entrepreneurs, right? Like your core values are how you live your life and run your business.
Absolutely. It's not stagnant. I think a lot of people do fall into that trap. That's a great point. We actually had, how long, I don't know, it's like maybe a couple weeks ago, we had our employees like do their own VTOs for each role that they were in, and then like bring their core values and everything. And we actually adopted 2 from, the combination of everybody on our team. And it's just, you grow, you change as an individual, and your company does too. I mean, when you first got together, I don't think I've ever heard of a company that just, the way they set it up day one, that's how they operate, year 2. So you gotta be flexible. That's a great point.
They should be running the world if somebody did that.
Yeah, right.
We need to find them and put them in charge.
They knew exactly how it was going to work. 10 years in the future.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us now. You kind of mentioned that in the beginning, you had a little bit of that shiny object syndrome, right? You were trying to do too many different types of deals. You were marketing and just whatever it was, right? You were trying to fix and flip and maybe have some rentals and wholesale or whatever it was. How did you settle on where you're at now? Because you're really focused on more short-term rentals, midterm rentals, right? And property management.
Yep. Yeah. So I remember it clear as day. We joined a local syndicate, local little real estate mastermind here in Pittsburgh. And we, probably around last fall, we had gone to the first meeting, and there was a gentleman there that did a lot of business consulting, but also like ran his wife's family's real estate company. So like tons of experience and just like pouring into us. Right. And he was like, hey, listen, like, why don't you guys come to my office? Like, I really think I can help you in your business. Like, let's just come and like, let's just talk about what you guys are doing, where you want to go. And, you know, I want to give you feedback. And we're like, yeah, like, sure. Like when? Tomorrow? Like, let's do this. Right. So, like right now, like, can we get
Right. I'm free. Yeah, let's go.
Totally free. So we went and met with, his name was Gabe. We went and met with him, and, you know, we give him our rundown, and, you know, we're throwing all this stuff at him. And, you know, he's just like, well, first off, you guys are doing a ton of stuff, like a ton of stuff. And, you know, you're clearly like feeling like you're in the weeds and in the day to day. And it's like, where do we go? What do we do? And he just looks at me and he goes, you need to stop buying real estate and you need to run your business. And I was like, well, but what do you mean, you know? But it was like, I know I've heard that term before, or like heard those, you know, run your business, like you're building a business, but I don't feel like until that moment, either of us felt like we were ever really doing that, because we were just saying yes to every property that we could get that was a deal, right? That made sense. And like, let's take on another project. Let's do this. But we weren't building our business, and we were just hustling, right? We were just doing the next thing and doing the next task. And we weren't sitting down and saying like, hey, so what's the business plan, right? Like, how are we bringing in cash flow to support the purchases that we're making? And, you know, looking at our finances, and like, we weren't doing any of that. It was just like,
how are we going to hire people to replace us? You're just like, I'm just getting it done.
I'm just going to keep doing it. Right. Like it was just very much like it, but it was like in that moment, we were like, oh, okay. Like this is a critical, like pivotal point in like this company. And we either leave this meeting and start making changes, or we're just going to continue to run around, you know? So that was kind of and then it's like, well, what's next, right? Like what steps do you take? So I think it took us a little bit of time to really think about like, okay, what is that? You know, my background is very much operational and processes and strategy and leading teams and building teams. And, you know, I just never thought of how do I apply those skills to this job, you know? And it was like, it was almost like he was giving me permission to do that and figure out how to do that, you know?
That was a big aha moment, right?
100%. I was just like, oh, like I've done all of these things, not at the scale of, you know, running my own company, but like, I'm like, I've built teams, I've written policies, made processes, implemented processes, like program manage, all this stuff. And I was like, that's kind of what this is. I just need to wear a different hat and start, you know, putting that stuff into place. So we really kicked off like a kind of standardization effort in our business, and started standardizing what we could and documenting things that we needed to. We were like teetering on like pieces of EOS without knowing EOS was a system, right? Because I feel like most companies like Amazon operates on some form of like EOS, right? Like it's very much like there's a structure, there's a cadence, there's all that kind of stuff. So I was used to that environment. We just weren't doing it in our business.
Yeah. Well, it's nothing like mind blowing. It's all very practical stuff that's just broken down and like, just do it and you'll be better for it. But everybody's like, oh, EOS is this whole big thing. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it's everywhere. It's just, it's not, you know, it's labeled differently or something, you know, somewhere else.
Yeah, for sure.
So how did you settle on short-term rentals specifically?
Yeah. So also in that meeting, you know, we just kind of looked at each other and we're like, well, what are we really good at? And what do we like doing? Because it's important to us to enjoy what we're doing too.
Yeah.
And we both just simultaneously we're like, well, it's definitely like the furnished rental space for us, you know, and it's a way for both of us to kind of shine with like our skill sets, right? Brigitte's the designer, and you know, I'll manage the hell out of it and put the processes in place to build the teams and the mechanisms to keep it running, right? So we were like, well, that just makes sense for us. So that's kind of when we started moving full steam forward with building out Society G and transitioning our own short-term rentals back to us to manage, because we had a few managers. And that was kind of eye-opening to us too, is that we felt like that we weren't getting the service that we would give, right? Or that we wanted. Probably pains in the ass for our managers, I'm sure, but you know, but there's just a different level of, you know, guest experience that we wanted to make sure that our guests were getting. So taking all that back, and then in the last 4 months, we've started onboarding investor clients that, you know, they've come to us and said, hey, I have a rental that I want to make furnished or turn into a short-term rental. Can you help? Right. So we do the design, furnishing, and then management for them as well. So we're looking for like the opportunities to just kind of take over management of short-term rentals that are already in place, or partnerships where we work with an investor and find the property together, right, is an option, where there's co-ownership and it's a JV type agreement. And then also just folks that want to come in as equity partners to have their money make them a little bit of money. So what's cool is that there's so many ways that you can do it, right?
Yeah.
And still get a really good ROI.
Now, so at this point, how many are you looking to like own that's under your company versus like outsource and manage completely for somebody else?
Yeah. I don't know if we've figured out entirely what we want that to look like, but I can share what we're sort of looking at right now and in the next, probably by the end of this year. So we have 6 that we own and operate, 2 that we are managing currently, 4 that we're setting up right now for other folks. So it'll be design, furnish, and then management. Yeah. And then I think there's a couple more in the next few months, the same way, design management. So we'll probably add another 6 to 8 of just management rentals that we'll manage. And then we have 5 construction projects. These are the remnants of all the projects we have.
Right.
I laugh because it's like a good laugh, so I don't cry. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But it's coming to an end. It's coming to an end, so it is good.
Exactly. So Brigitte is managing the construction and rehab for those 5 as we kind of get to the tail end and get them done, and they will also be furnished rentals for us, or short-term rentals for us. And then we are working through the final details of a small hotel, boutique hotel acquisition, and that will bring after all the rehab, so probably about a year down the road, that'll give us 13 more rooms / short-term rentals that we would add to the portfolio. So we'll double it, which will be cool in like a year.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So you have come quite a long way, and you said you just started in 2020, right?
Yeah. Beginning at end of 2020. So
nice. Well, first of all, congratulations. Second of all, if you had to go back, right, and you could hit a magic button, you know, F12, whatever it is, and you could go right back and to yourself right before you sign up for that $17 amazing priced course, by the way, what would be the biggest thing that you would say, hey, don't do this, this took you way off course, just focus? What would it be?
Honestly, I think for me, it was more of a self-doubt. Like, don't believe that you can't do this before you even try it.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think that was probably the biggest insecurity for me, was the fear of like doing it on my own and not having, you know, the Amazon, the Target, the Lowe's behind me that I always had in my previous careers. Yeah. And I think because of that, like I hesitated to really like dig in and get started until I got back, right? Like I did a little bit in Seattle, but it was like I needed that reassurance of meeting Brigitte that was like, oh, okay, like let me do this with somebody and it's going to be easier and more fun for the both of us to kind of push forward. But I like that insane like self-doubt and like, what are you doing? Like you can't do this. Like that has always been like such a huge like voice in my head. And I think throughout all of my, jobs and careers, and it was something totally new, right? Because when you get to a point like where I was in my career, like you're the expert in what you do, right? And I'm starting something. I am like the least expert, right? I'm taking the $17 master class, right? But yeah, I think for me, it's the mental, like just strength to be able to say, like, I'm gonna fucking do this, right? And like, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm not gonna say things right. Like, I'm gonna mess things up, but keep moving forward and educate yourself enough to where you understand what you're doing, right? And you can make educated decisions and educated guesses, like when it comes to those spots where like you're a little unsure.
I love that. I don't know if Jake's response to teaming up with me would be the same as yours and Brigitte, where it's like, okay, this is going to be fun, or together.
No,
are you kidding? Like, what am I getting into?
We did so much evaluation. We did like 40 hours of evaluation before we actually partnered up. Like we did some deals together. And then I think we were on like was it a Justin Colby training? It was like the science of flipping or something like that. We were on some live webinar because it was still, COVID was still around, and they were just talking about like partnering up and wholesaling and stuff. And then both of us were like typing at the same time in a message, and she was like, do you want to partner up? And I was like, hey, what do you think about partnering up?
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, it was actually the interesting thing though, I was actually at the event live because Arizona didn't care about COVID. We didn't care about COVID. It was fine. After like 3 weeks, we were open. So I was live at the event and he was attending remotely, but we were both listening to the same speaker, and it really did happen that way. I had already bought 4 properties from him over a 6-month period that he had wholesale to me. And I was kind of like just coaching him along and helping him out. And then like at the same time, we text each other, do you want to partner up? And I was like, holy crap, it was meant to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is really cool. And you guys are doing it all like virtually too, which is like really crazy.
Yep.
Yeah, we've got team members all over the globe, really. We have some in the Philippines, one in California, new hire, one in Atlanta, and then I'm in North Carolina, Marie's in Arizona.
Yeah. So all different time zones, all different places on the planet. But
you get on a call and it's like, good morning, good evening, good afternoon.
or the middle of the night.
Right.
Yeah. So, well, awesome. Mary, I am so excited that you joined us. If you could give our listeners kind of just like one last piece of advice, what would it be? Because I mean, I don't know if you could top just the mental game. I think that was phenomenal awareness now looking back, but tell everybody how they can get in touch with you. Maybe somebody wants to buy some, short-term, midterm rentals in Pittsburgh and partner up with you.
Yeah. So you can follow all the fun things that Brigitte and I have going on Instagram. We're at societyg.co, and then also at We Buy Homes PGH. So we started as We Buy Homes because we were just doing acquisitions and all kinds of, rehabs and stuff like that. So yeah, definitely reach out. We are always wanting to connect with people, always wanting to support and advise and just kind of chit chat about real estate. It's kind of all we do and what we love to do. So, and also just pointing people in the right direction. If it's getting started, if it's, finding a local group, like whatever, like I 100% there to help.
Carry as you grow.
Carry as you climb, baby. let me see. Yeah, you have to say it right, Jake.
Yeah, sorry. I'll rewind it. I'll get it in the edit.
I'm trying to think of a good piece of advice. It's like there's so many things because we've effed up so many times that you're just like, oh, like what's that one piece? Honestly, I think it's probably going to be twofold. So if this doesn't answer your question, yell at me and I'll re-answer. But I think it's important to like pick your lane, right? And say, this is what I'm going to get really good at. And this is where, and be okay with that, because you're going to constantly be the shiny object. It's constantly going to be, but this is an opportunity. Oh, but this project, I love that property. I want that property, right? But if it doesn't fit your goals and like what you need to do in the next 6 months to 12 months, you have to get good at saying no and having that patience to say, I know that it's coming. Like, yes, I wanted that property. It's not the right time. It doesn't make sense for our business. Like there's a bigger picture at play, and you have to realize that it's not just the individual goals and the acquiring properties as fast as you can. You've got to have a mission. And like, we did not start out that way at all, and I think that we've had to play a lot of catch up to get to that point where we're kind of at a place where now we're saying, hey, the decisions we make align with our goals and they align with where we're going as a company, because we weren't doing any of that at first.
Right.
So yeah, so that, and I think once you pick know your lane, know what lane you're going to in your mission, find the people that are going to support you in your network that are either doing those things or they're just bringing positivity to whatever you're doing, because shit's going to get hard a lot at times, right? And like where you just want to give up, and those are the people that are pushing you through it. Even people not in real estate, right? Like I have a friend that I joke that like she's the reason I'm doing this, because like we went out to lunch 2 years ago and she's like, Mary, like, you want to do this? You're telling me you want to do this? Like, you just need to do it. And I was just like, all right, Nikki, like, thanks for that. It's like, you just need people that believe in you and push you further than like, your parents ever did. Like you need those people that are like your inner circle that are like, let's fucking go.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you read Who Not How by Dan Sullivan?
I have not. It's on my list though.
You got to read it. Anybody listening to this, do yourself a favor. It'll that shift in like just asking who could help me get this done instead of how, to your point. Amazing. That's my final little nugget for this episode.
Awesome. Well, Mary, thank you so much for joining us. And hopefully people will reach out on Instagram. We'll have all the notes. So thank you again.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you guys so much.